Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. Of course, this is a joint event by IMO, IRENA, UNCTAD, and the World Bank on producing fusion marine fuels, opportunities for scaling up renewable energy production in developing countries. We have very little time. It's only an hour and a half, and I hope that we can have a good exchange later on. So without any further ado, I would like to invite first the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, Mr. Kitack, Lynn, to say a few words. Secretary General.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great pleasure to welcome you to this event, which forms an important contribution by the international shipping community to COP27. Also, I'd like to express my deepest thanks to those organizations who are co-hosting this event, the UNCTAD, the World Bank, IRENA, and decarbonizing international shipping is a priority issue for IMO. All of us involved in this sector are committed to act together in achieving the highest possible level of ambition. Last year, IMO and UNCTAD organized a side event during COP26 in Glasgow that addressed the opportunities developing countries may have in providing zero-carbon fuels to global shipping. Following that event's success, having seen the interest of many countries and stakeholders from shipping, port, and energy sectors to explore these opportunities further, I'm very glad that the World Bank and the IRENA have joined us this year to co-organize this event. Decarbonizing international shipping requires a rapid shift from today's predominant use of fossil fuels to zero carbon alternatives. But shipping is also a key enabler of the global energy transition as it serves global trade and sustainable development in safe, clean, efficient, and affordable way. I'm encouraged to see many recent announcements on upscaling renewable marine fuels production infrastructure around the world. Many developing countries around the world have abundant access to renewable energy sources. So I see a lot of potential for these countries to play a key role in the production and supply side of renewable fuels for the global shipping community. However, we need to collectively increase our efforts in this area to maximize these opportunities. IMO is making fast progress in defining the global regulatory framework consisting of a technical economic measure that will set global shipping on an ambitious path to phase out GHG emission. So, incentivizing the availability and the scalability of low and zero carbon marine fuels and technologies and ensuring the ability of all countries to take part in this transition is paramount for IMO. Therefore, in parallel to our work on defining global greenhouse gas reduction measures, we actively work with partners within the UN family and private sector on supporting developing countries with adjusting to energy transition while we address capacity, technology, and infrastructure needs. IMO has initiated a wide range of projects and knowledge partnerships that bring together IMO's maritime expertise and an unrivaled global network, while our partners provide experience, investment, and the financial expertise, and other resources and in-kind support. By means of these joint initiatives, IMO, with the partners such as UNCTAD, World Bank, IRENA, assist member states in developing the necessary capacity and infrastructure to provide renewable fuel production and make it available for the global shipping industry. During this event, you will hear from the distinguished speakers from Brazil, Egypt, Namibia, Singapore, and the UAE about their experiences and the perspectives in setting up the necessary national and international policies and infrastructure that will make energy transition a reality. Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely thank all the panelists for sharing their experiences and all participants today, both here and those joining us remotely, for your interest. Collaboration and the partnership will help us in finding solutions to the issues we face today. And the IMO, as the leading global forum to regulate international shipping, will continue to support the decarbonization journey and to promote the just and equitable transition to zero carbon shipping, leaving no one behind. I wish you an inspiring event and hope to see many of you again in December, London, when IMO's negotiation resume on defining the decarbonization framework for global shipping, duly taking into account the outcome of COP27. Let me add just one point. First of all, I would like to congratulate the very successful organizing and progress of COP27 to government of Egypt, very successful. I had a very good impression from COP26 in Glasgow last year, since the adoption of Paris Agreement. But last year, Glasgow, very successful. And also COP27, extremely successful. Your president, together with many other political leaders, they made a good statement, pledges. So I believe this COP27 will contribute more than expected. At the same time, I would like to express my deepest appreciation to the all IMO member states and the industry and NGOs for your enormous effort and the commitment to facilitate IMO path for decarbonization. If I recall a few years ago, compared to this time, highly improved. So we have to adopt our conclusion of a policy middle of next year. But I've been very concerned about the progress, whether we can successfully adopt our conclusion or strategy next year or not. But thanks to your support, I feel more comfortable. So I hope your continuous support to the end story when we adopt our strategy. Okay, I really appreciate all industry, particularly ICS, and also very good support of the ITEP as well. So we are happy, but we have to make it next year. So in that sense, I really appreciate your support, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Secretary General. As you said, of course, the outcome from COP27 will be reported to the IMO, and we will take due account of it. We now have a video message from Rebecca Grynspan, Secretary General of UNCTAD, who unfortunately was not able to join us today.
Dear Nicolas Peltier, Global Director of Transport of the World Bank, dear Francesco La Camera, Director General of IRENA, dear Lynn Kitack, Secretary General of IMO, dear friend, dear Nicolas Peltier, Global Director of Transport of the World Bank, dear Francesco La Camera, Director General of IRENA, dear participants. The transition to low-carbon economies is an imperative for all countries and sectors, including maritime transport. While maritime transport is the most carbon-efficient mode of transport, international shipping still contributes 0.9% of global CO2 emissions. The problem is that shipping remains heavily dependent on oil. As it currently stands, with available infrastructure, technology, and financial resources, shipping is not ready yet to switch to cleaner sources. Yet we need maritime transport so much. COVID and the war in Ukraine have demonstrated how vital, reliable maritime transport networks are for supply chains and trade. It is also thanks to shipping that the grain harvested in Ukraine and Russia could leave the ports and be transported to where it is much needed. So how can we transition to low and zero carbon fuels in maritime transport? In the short run, the focus is on how to reduce carbon fuels. Gas in the form of liquefied natural gas provides an alternative to oil. Yes, it is not a perfect solution, but can be seen as a transition fuel. And it has already gained traction. However, the future hinges of investing in alternative non-fossil fuels. This is not only a challenge, it can also be an opportunity. Many developing countries have much potential to participate in the production and commercialization of non-fossil fuels, such as those based on solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, or biomass energy. Many developing countries can also develop bunkering infrastructure to distribute non-fossil fuels to ships around the world. Ports play key roles in the green maritime transition as they serve as energy hubs providing shoreside electricity, and infrastructure for storing and fueling ships with future fuels. Ports will support the first movers and establish green corridors. But of course, there are many challenges. Uncertainty related to the future fuel and propulsion technologies can delay investment decisions, including by ship owners. In fact, fleet age is increasing and fleet growth is below potential. This delays the adoption of alternative fuels. Moreover, alternative fuels remain at a price disadvantage. There is still not sufficient investment, including in research and development. There are also market barriers and insufficient regulation on safety for handling and managing new fuels. And it is a question of finance. Developing countries need access to finance to have the right incentives and ability to invest in the transition. This requires innovative financing mechanisms, including public-private partnerships, climate finance, and instruments from multilateral development banks. Also, revenues generated from carbon pricing instruments could be recycled to support the deployment of zero-emission fuels and technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, we need a just transition to low and zero carbon fuels. This means that smaller players and less advanced economies need support to be able to participate in relevant efforts and share the associated benefits. UNCTAD support developing countries in these processes with trade and transport facilitation and guidance on smart ports. I cannot emphasize enough this point. We are in a critical time for energy policy and energy politics. The current crisis may push us in the wrong direction and backward in our commitment to sustainable development. We cannot afford moving in that direction. We need the efforts of all to support decarbonization. We must seize this opportunity an opportunity for collaboration, for coordination, and for cooperation. In this spirit, I wish you a fruitful event. I thank you.
I now would like to invite Mr. Francesco Director General from IRENA, to deliver his remarks. Francesco, please.
Grazie e buonasera. Thanks and good evening to all. And thank Arsenio for your work. Welcome. And thank you all for being here. I am delighted that you have you all gathered here to discuss and advance this important topic. Maritime shipping is a key sector of the global economy, accounting almost 90% of global trade, which also make it responsible for around 3% of the world's annual greenhouse gas emissions. This may sound like a small number, but in reality, it's larger than the emission of a majority of countries, and if you look at Africa, of a continent. As you all know, in order to successfully limit global temperature rise to 1.5 Celsius, there is a need to decarbonize energy supply and use by 2050. Our latest World Energy Transition Outlook shows that over 90% of the solutions needed to decarbonize the energy system involve renewable energy. And the shipping sector is not an exception. Eliminating CO2 emissions in such a strategic and internationally competitive sector will no doubt be challenging, yet is technically feasible through the direct and indirect use of renewable energy. At the same time, it opens the door for the emergence of new players, such as developed countries. These tend to have excellent renewable sources and could benefit from this transition as suppliers of green hydrogen and its byproduct, for example. As a hard-to-abate sector, shipping will almost certainly rely on the use of advanced biofuels and green synthetic fuels for its full decarbonization. But beyond that, the shipping sector will also play a critical role in the transport and trade of the massive quantities of this renewable fuel. IRENA estimates that roughly 800 terajoules of advanced biofuels and 15 million tons of green hydrogen, mostly in the form of ammonia, will be needed to decarbonize shipping. But just as importantly, shipping will be involved of the trade of another 75 million tons of green hydrogen each year, which are critical to the decarbonization of other industrial sectors. These amounts of hydrogen are roughly equivalent to the total global hydrogen demand today. Emissions from the shipping sectors are expected to increase if no action is taken. Therefore, there is no better time to act than now. The shipping sector as a whole needs to work closely and in coordination with other sectors, not only to ensure its own supply of renewable fuels, but also to be able to transport these fuels and enable the decarbonization of other sectors. Governments will have to play an instrumental role in making this happen. First, working closely with fuels manufacturers, ports, ship owners, and the rest of the value chain. investing in research and development and developing cleaner technologies, deploying mechanisms to accelerate the demand for renewable fuels, regulating and enabling the trade and use of renewable fuels, and facilitating the deployment of the necessary infrastructure to satisfy the increasing demand. What I want to make clear that often renewables are being criticized because they are variable. So say how we can count on something that is not always there, not always they see the sun, not always they see the wind. This is absolutely a fake, because it's not true. Do you think that gas, oil, coal are not variable? They are variable, because if you don't extract them, if you don't use the infrastructure to bring to the market, you will never get the gas, you will never get the oil. So the fact is that for having an acceleration in the energy transition, the priority is the infrastructure. And we have to be understanding that this infrastructure is not just the land infrastructure, so the grid, that it should be interconnected, flexible, balanced, but the land grid has to connect with the sea route, with the sea grid, if you really want to make the transformation happen. And this is the reason we are collaborating with the IMO, with the International Chamber of Shipping. In our General Assembly, we will dedicate a session on this, to understand that port has to change nature, transport has to change nature. So all this has to happen, and unfortunately has to happen soon, because we are really too late to be in track for the achievement of the Paris Agreement goal. So IRENA is already working in some of this area with, in the context of our collaborative framework with our friends, and we are partners. And we are keen to continue working with you to foster dialogue and collaboration, not only amongst our members, but also with the private sector. We think the private sector has to play an important role, and we have to work together. I really expect to have some contribution from this panel today. Grazie molte. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Director General. And now we'll play a video message from Mr. Nicolas Peltier, from the Global Transport Director for the World Bank, who also sends apologies for not being able to join us today.
My name is Nicolas Peltier and I'm the Global Director for Transport at the World Bank. First of all, let me thank you for the kind invitation to this exciting event. Advancing global climate action by exploring the potential to produce renewable energies in developing countries is of major interest for many stakeholders, including the World Bank. Particularly, the production of future zero-carbon bunker fuels for the shipping industry is drawing our attention today. At the moment, the shipping industry is facing a classic chicken and egg dilemma. Progressive ship owners lack the incentive to invest in zero-carbon ships as long as there is no large-scale zero-carbon fuel supply. In return, potential fuel suppliers wait for a clear signal that zero-carbon ships are on order before they are willing to place their investments in corresponding green fuel production facilities. Given their strategic geographic locations and energy resource endowments, there is a large untapped potential for zero-carbon fuel production in many developing countries. Developing such green fuel production sites in these countries is expected to significantly advance economic development and yield climate co-benefits, such as jobs, innovation, and air quality improvements. Against this backdrop, the World Bank has started to work with some of our client countries to develop a supply chain for these future zero-carbon fuels. In South Africa, for example, pre-feasibility studies are underway to assess the production, storage, supply, and export of zero green hydrogen, green ammonia, and green methanol at Saldanha Bay and Bogo Bay. In Morocco, we are currently finalizing the terms of reference for similar studies at the ports of Jof Lasfar, Tangiers Med, and Nador West. Further activities are considered in several Latin American countries, such as Colombia or Brazil. Last but certainly not least, we are in close dialogue with Namibia, whose hydrogen commissioner, James Mnyupe, will provide first-hand insights in a couple of minutes to harness shipping's decarbonization as a booster to the country's ambitions to become one of the world's key suppliers of green fuels. Fostering these engagements, many ports in developing countries can turn into the clean energy hubs of the future. The shipping sector, in return, will not only serve as an off-taker of this clean energy, but can also play a catalytic role in the decarbonization of many other industries, such as aviation, heavy industries, or chemicals, as the primary mode of transport between production and consumption sites. The World Bank is committed to support our client countries in investing in cleaner, safer, more inclusive, and more resilient modes of transport. If we advance transport decarbonization agenda strategically, we will not only make a major contribution to respecting the Paris Agreement's temperature goals, but also put the World Bank's client countries in a position where they can achieve many sustainable development goals at the same time. In light of the climate emergency and many other crises at the moment, we invite all partners to join forces on this exciting journey. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would like to invite Mr. Geoffrey Ross Pyatt, hope I pronounced that correctly, apologies, Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources from the United States. Welcome.
Thank you very much and good evening. Thank you to the IMO for inviting me to be here. I'm with you tonight because the United States recognizes the importance of shipping sector decarbonization and the great scope of this challenge. Global shipping emits about 1 billion tons of carbon annually, accounting for 3% of total carbon emissions worldwide. If shipping were a country, it would be the 8th largest emitter in the world. And that share is continuing to increase as other major commercialized technologies are helping to decarbonize competing sectors. If we don't accelerate action today, including crucially developing new low and zero emission fuels at commercial scale, some studies estimate that this sector could account for 17% of emissions by 2050. I've recently finished up 6 years as American ambassador in Greece, and during my time in Athens, I had a lot of shipowner friends, and I saw firsthand how this sector was dealing with the transition. But I also came to understand how, in many ways, shipping is the most globalized industry of all. It is integral to the global market integration that is driving growth in so many parts of the world. And as the IRENA DG pointed out, shipping is also essential to the transportation of the materials and fuels that are essential to the process of energy transition. So there is an enormously consequential feedback loop at work here. My president, President Biden, has emphasized that the climate crisis and the process of energy transition that it is driving is also a fantastic commercial growth opportunity. And in my current role as Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources, I see that demonstrated every day. Decarbonization of shipping is no exception to this principle. It will be a massive driver of new investment in clean energy sectors and job creation in the shipping industry, but also in maritime services and shipbuilding. The US government and our partners are taking the green shipping effort with great seriousness, trying to create the space and support for the private sector to develop the technologies that will be necessary to tackle this challenge. From the 2021 Leaders Summit on Climate, where we centered green shipping, to COP26, where we worked with the UK, the Marshall Islands, Denmark, and many other partners on the Clydebank Declaration and the Declaration on Zero Emission Shipping, to the 2022 Our Ocean Conference, where green shipping was one of the core elements in our actions on ocean-based climate solutions. In fact, one of my very last actions as American ambassador to Greece, I'm proud to say, was working with Foreign Minister Dendias to see that Greece would become the host of the 2024 Our Oceans Conference, where I know the Greek government will be keen to highlight this particular sector. And of course, just a few days ago here at COP27, during the World Leaders Summit, we joined with Norway to launch the Green Shipping Challenge. Governments and the private sector have made more than 40 major announcements on key problem sets: development and production of zero-emission fuels, investment in zero-emission vessels and other technologies, and accelerating projects to demonstrate and develop green shipping corridors. But at home as well, we are taking aggressive action in the United States. We are implementing an American maritime decarbonization strategy with the budgetary support to make it real. The recently passed Inflation Reduction Act includes a $3 billion rebate and grant program at the Environmental Protection Agency to provide funding for zero-emission port equipment and other technologies in the U.S. The U.S. Department of Transportation has announced more than $700 million to fund more than 40 port facility improvements across the United States in this same spirit. And we are launching 3 bilateral programs with Canada, the Republic of Korea, and the United Kingdom to develop green shipping corridors. Through the Green Shipping Corridor Initiation Project, the State Department is dedicating resources to ensure broader global participation in the transition of shipping early in this process and supporting feasibility studies for routes that involve developing countries. These government actions are both urgent and necessary, but it's going to take concerted effort from all of us, governments, international organizations, and the private sector to make real progress on decarbonization. That's why I'm so pleased to see the global focus on these issues and the broad spectrum of participation and attendees here today. I very much look forward to seeing the results of the discussion and continuing the State Department's and the Energy Bureau's close engagement with our partners in the global shipping industry to see this transition to successful conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those remarks. And to close the high-level segment, please allow me to play a video message from Diego Pardow Lorenzo, who's the Minister of Energy from Chile.
The international shipping sector contributes with around 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which will increase if mitigation measures are not taken as a matter of urgency. Chile is fully committed to the use of sustainable maritime transport for global logistics chains, and our aim is to be an example for the countries that signed the Clydebank Declaration. We are a country with an outstanding availability of renewable energy, particularly in the regions of Magallanes and Antofagasta. This makes the Chilean coastline a strategic place to foster the supply of clean, zero-emission maritime fuels. By working together with the local communities and governments, Chile will support a long-term effort for reducing the emission of the maritime sector. The decarbonization of maritime transport via the early implementation of green corridors is poised to become a leading example in international collaboration, private and public efforts, and a long-term vision, which is in turn required to reach both national and international carbon neutrality goals.
Thank you very much. And with that, we have concluded the high-level segment. My name is Arsenio Dominguez. I'm the director of the Marine Environment Division at IMO. And I'm going to switch my hats from MC to moderator of the panel. The panelists have been kindly waiting for us whilst we have listened to the great message that we have received from different Secretary Generals and the Assistant Secretary of State. I now would like to invite Ms. Lynn Lu, who's going to break the ice, if we can put it that way, in order to start discussing how future fuels needs and challenges are established for developing country. Lynn is CEO of the Global Center of Maritime Decarbonization in Singapore since its launch about 1.5 years ago. And the background, she has a background on chemical engineering and has an academic background at Princeton University of over 15 years. Lynn, I know you had a microphone. I'll try to do my best with the slides here. This is going to work out.
Can you hear me? Ooh, okay. Good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. As Arsenio said, my name is Lynn Lu. I lead the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization during the day, and at night I'm a professor at Princeton University in the Chemical Engineering Department. I was asked to set the stage to tell you about a little bit about shipping, because this session is really about energy production. So I would do that with a few slides, but before I do that, I'd like to thank our host country for inviting us and for actually sponsoring our Blue Zone passes. This is my first time to COP, and it's been an extraordinary experience, and the IMO for the invitation to speak. Arsenio and I are gonna play tag. We're going to see how good our chemistry is, because he's going to flip the slides for me. So please do that. Slides. Chemistry's already broken. Maybe I should do it.
My apologies. Let's try it again.
All right, so we'll get started here. So, right, so we've heard already, earlier at the high-level discussion, that shipping is a global industry. It's integral to the global supply chain. Yet, unless you're in shipping, shipping is almost invisible. You don't think about shipping. You only think about it when you hear it in the newspapers because there's a bottleneck in the global supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. Yet, shipping is so important as part of the global trade. It's responsible for transporting 11 billion tons of goods, corresponding to 90% of the global trade. So what that means is the things that you own, if it didn't come on a ship, then the raw materials that make the things you own came on a ship. That's how important shipping is. And you've heard time and again that shipping emits 3% of global GHG emissions. That's comparable to aviation. I think we can debate about 6th versus 8th, but it's a lot. If it's the 6th largest emitter, its emissions is greater than that of Germany. Shipping is unique, and this is one of the things that drew me into shipping. The fact that it's a global industry and it's regulated by a single entity called the International Maritime Organization. There are targets associated with reducing shipping's emissions. 40% reduction in carbon intensity relative to 2008 levels by 2030, and then 50% total GHG emissions reduction by 2050. Of course, these targets are being reviewed and are going to be increased subsequently. So we've heard all week this week that shipping is a difficult to abate sector. So why is it so difficult to abate shipping? If we look at the center column, shipping is really heterogeneous. There are 55,000 ships on the water today. They comprise of bulkers, tankers, container liners, ro-ro, so roll-on, roll-off, or vehicle carriers, et cetera, et cetera. They plight different routes, they're different sizes, they're different age, and they all have different constraints. That's why when it's a very heterogeneous segment like shipping, one needs to have a heterogeneous portfolio of solutions to think about decarbonizing the sector. Now we focus on the left side. The ecosystem for maritime decarbonization is not mature. What do I mean by that? In order for shipping to get to net zero, we need to think about alternative fuels. But alternative fuels are not available at scale or at cost today. What we can do today can shave emissions, and we should definitely do those things, but they're not going to get us to net zero. Now, if we look at the third column over there, GMF and others have said that in order for us to decarbonize, 5% of shipping fuel must have zero emissions by 2030. And one can look at this and say, well, yeah, 5%. What does that mean? We can translate that. 5%, if you account for the growth, that translates to roughly about 16 million tons of fossil fuel, because fossil fuel is more energy dense. And so if you were to look at this in terms of numbers for green fuels, that translates to about 37 million tons of either green ammonia or green methanol. Because methanol and ammonia, energy density difference is only about 20%. Again, when you look at this number, you say, okay, it's about 40 million tons. What does that actually mean? So I'll give you two statistics to set a reference point. One is that currently gray ammonia that's being globally traded, that's about 20 million tons. Globally traded ammonia is about 20 million tons. 5% corresponds to 40 million tons of green ammonia. Another statistic, IRENA most recent report has shown, by estimating all the projects that are out there, by 2030 there'll be 15 million tons of green ammonia, okay? So these numbers put into perspective what 40 million tons mean. It's a lot. But I'm a glass half full kind of gal, and so I look at this, and I think this is a tremendous opportunity for countries that are rich in natural resources in solar and wind. This is a tremendous opportunity to help shipping decarbonize. My last slide, please. in addition to availability, what are the other bottlenecks that one needs to think about? At the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization, we look across the supply chain and we try to figure out where the gaps are and we try to plug in the gaps. And so here, we think safety is a really important gap. These future fuels, like ammonia, can be toxic. So understanding and being able to handle ammonia as a bunker fuel safely is really, really important. We have a safety study ongoing. The guidelines from the safety study is going to be pushed through so that they can become technical references and then pushed through the Standards Development Organization so that they can be adopted and standardized uniformly. So safety and regulatory framework. We can't forget the competency framework. Because these are new fuels, we need to train the operators and seafarers to properly handle these fuels. So competency frameworks and being able to train the manpower so that they can handle these properly is really important. Just yesterday at the Just Transition panel, we heard that 800,000 seafarers need to be trained. So that's a very important part of plugging the gap in order to enable these future fuels to be used when they're ready. Last but not least, if you look across the supply chain, well, we need the engines and we need the ships. That's being developed. We need the infrastructure. We heard already that you need the infrastructure at the ports to be able to support bunkering. So that needs to be ready in order for us to decarbonize collectively. So hopefully with that, I've set the stage for our panel discussion to come. Arsenio?
Thank you very much, Lynn. And distinguished guests, we're now going to move to the panel. And we have heard already from the Secretary General of IMO, for example, and UNCTAD as well, on the just transition that is necessary, the support that member states need in how all the organizations are doing that. IRENA had talked about the accelerated demand that is needed for alternative fuels or renewable fuels. The World Bank has expressed the commitment to support the need for the transition, and of course the developing states in particular, to get all in the same objective. And the US has recognized that shipping is the most globalized industry and also has highlighted the investment that they are actually introducing. For example, 40 port facilities improvements in the green shipping corridors. Now, let me start with Mr. James Mnyupe, and I'm going to apologize in advance if I do not pronounce the names correctly. And James is currently an economic advisor of the Office of the President of Namibia. He has a background in accounting and equity and investment management, and is currently tasked with exploring the potential of Namibia in renewable hydrogen production, one of the fuels that, of course, we're talking about for the decarbonization of the industry. Having heard of the large quantities that we actually need, how can Namibia, or what is Namibia doing in order to move towards the decarbonization of the shipping industry? James?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for having me, by the way, and for all the organizers for inviting us. I think one of the things Namibia is doing is being comfortable with being a first mover in an industry that is nascent and one that is very hard to define. I think what the government did is they identified essentially the potential to incubate a synthetic fuels industry in Namibia as a key enabler for the diversification of our economy. I think that was step one. Step two was we then began to really essentially profile ourselves as a potential exporter, but coming to the realization that we couldn't do that alone. And so we started partnering with various other countries along the way as quickly as we can. I think one of the key things that we did that is very relevant for this discussion is that we realized that shipping is extremely critical for two reasons, and I think we've mentioned them. One, as an off-taker for the fuels, and so we saw the shipping industry as a customer. but two as an enabler, because shipping would be critical in transporting the molecules cost effectively from Namibia to elsewhere around the world. And so very quickly, you know, we, through our policy structures, we encouraged our port, which is Namport, and they signed an MOU with the Port of Rotterdam and very soon thereafter with the Port of Antwerp. But that happened after sort of government-led discussions on a bilateral basis with those countries, both Belgium and the Netherlands, and MOUs have been signed at the Ministry of Mines and Energy level. And in fact, on Tuesday, the Prime Minister of Netherlands came to the Namibian pavilion and has now announced a substantial amount of financing to help get either a strategy going or to build the infrastructure that Lynn was telling us. And so I think the solution for a country like Namibia, but many others as well, and I'm sure we'll hear from Brazil, is to come to the realization that a portfolio of actions is actually needed to really begin to move the needle. At the very highest policy, you need to prioritize the decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors as a key enabler for diversifying the economy. We did that COP26. But, you know, as Professor Lynn was mentioning, we've gone all the way down to, you know, instructing our two top-tier tertiary sector institutions to actually come together and put together what we've called the Namibian Green Hydrogen Research Institute, and then mandated them to start training Namibians to acquire the skills that are needed to decarbonize something like shipping, for example. And again, we're doing that in partnership with institutions around the world. So I think it's a top-to-bottom response from a country that is looking to be a strategic player in this space.
Thank you. That's very interesting, in particular when you mentioned Namibia as a first mover. The profile of potential exporter and partnering. So immediately we're moving into the opportunities that decarbonization is bringing into developing countries. With that, can I invite Ms. Nawal Yousif Alhanaee? Did I get it right? I did. Currently Director of Future Energy Department in the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure of the United Arab Emirates. She has a degree in civil engineering and urban planning, and has worked in different roles in the Ministries of Energy and Infrastructure Development, including the roles in addressing the competitiveness of the maritime transport. And since you're all about competitiveness, and we heard from Namibia, we would love to hear from you as well, what UAE is working on.
Yes,
Please.
Definitely. So when it comes to the governmental sector, definitely everyone play a significant role, and we are all complementing each other within the value chain. However, we as a ministry now launched our leadership roadmap when it's come to hydrogen, for instance. And this roadmap was launched previously on COP26, where it targets 25% key markets by 2030. So for hydrogen and derivatives to decarbonize our hard-to-abate sectors, especially shipping, aviation, as well as refinery and others, we already set 5 levers to make sure that we achieve those targets. One of them is the public-private partnership, where it is very crucial for us to work with the private sector as well to make sure we achieve our net zero targets that we announced last year, yes. And we was the first MENA region country to announce its ambition toward net zero pathway. Definitely international collaboration, where we are already having a lot of bilateral relationship with different countries as an export, as well as technology exchange in some of different countries. In addition to that, we have also collaboration and represent the country when it's come to different international organizations such as IRENA, IMO. Also, we have IPHE as well as SEM and other platforms where we already set and align our standard with the international standards, regulation, policies, and so forth. So we have a lot to share with the audience, hopefully. And it's worth to mention that UAE already updating its energy strategy now. as we launched in 2017, and now we are including further renewable energy. Before we were focusing on PVs, wind. However, we are focusing now more on hydrogen, hydroelectrical power as waste to energy and other sources of renewable energy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Key points, the public-private partnerships, but the collaboration as well, the development of the technology, and of course, the focus on hydrogen, which leads me very nicely into inviting Rear Admiral Reda Ahmed Ismail, who is currently the first Undersecretary of the Ministry of Transport and the head of the Maritime Transport sector of Egypt, has a long career in Egyptian Navy, including extensive experience on board submarines. And of course, thank you very much for hosting us. Thank you for all the hospitality. The floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. First, let me explain my great pleasure for all of you. All countries join us in COP27, and I wish you happy stay in our country. All of us work all the time, but now we have opportunity to merge hard work with some nice time. So enjoy your stay in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Thank you, sir. First, the Egyptian government is acting proactively in hydrogen industry, given its successful achievement in the renewable energy as well as its strategic geographical location between Africa, Asia, and Europe, can also lead initiative to accelerate the interaction between the North African countries, a potential supplier, and EU, who are likely to become key hydrogen importers in the next decade. A successful hydrogen industry would support Egypt's environmental goals while so providing opportunities to revenue. SCC zone strategy is localizing the green fuel industry based on the three keys axes of green fuel manufacturing from green hydrogen and green ammonia and methanol. In addition to working in complementary green fuel industries for electric analyzer, solar panels and wind turbine, together with green fuel supply activity. Launching the project of solar cells to generate clean energy is one of the most important factories located in SCC zone. And it is an important step towards the transformation of renewable energy and the localization of renewable energy industries. SCC Zone provides full support to the companies that signed the MOU for the settlement of green fuel, especially with regard to the technical support of the phase of its feasibility studies. Due to the special nature of green fuel projects, the technical studies stage always requires cooperation to reach the best results that enable our partner to reach the implementation of the promising project according to the expected schedule. The cooperation between SCC Zone and Maersk and Siemens Energy in a green fuel project is an extension to the fruitful and constructive cooperation with these entities. Maersk is currently carrying out technical study related to optimal selection of production site, which will help determine the ways for the feeding industries to reach the facility to be implemented and help in studying all logistical, finance and legal means related to the project. There are great efforts made by Egyptian government implemented the green strategy in the electric sector, as we target reaching 42% of the total energy consumed by Egypt to be from new and renewable source by 2035. We pay great attention to such projects and cooperate with neighboring countries in electrical interconnection, such the coming project among Egypt, Greece, and Italy, which reflected Egypt's great capabilities in this field. And the end, we have our title, this COP27, Together for Implementation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Rear Admiral, in particular, for the efforts, as you mentioned, the government of Egypt. 42% renewables by 2035. The focus on hydrogen and other fuels as well, but of course the strategic location as a supplier, which leads me into our next panelist, Ms. Concepción Arias, who has had different roles in communications and public affairs for almost 8 years with Maersk, and is currently Chief Advisor for Climate and Green Transition. Concha has also had various other communications and journalism roles, both in Denmark and in Spain, as well as in Brussels and Bolivia. Now, coming from Maersk, after hearing from the different 3 member states into their efforts, of course, including Namibia as an early mover, what can you tell us about Maersk into the needs and also being an early mover?
Well, first of all, you have pronounced my name really nicely. You can see that we have a common language background. Anyway, thank you so much, Arsenio. Thank you, Secretary General, for inviting Maersk, roping us in this relevant event. I'm honored to represent A.P. Møller - Maersk as one of the companies that is definitely committed to be part of the solution to decarbonize one of today's heavily emitting industries and sectors, right? We know that we are part of the problem. Our company pollutes more than the country we are headquartered in, Denmark. So we definitely want to be part of the solution. And given the climate urgency, we are committed to also put in place an urgent response to this. So we have made carbon neutrality and a strategic imperative across all departments in our company. This commitment has made us to launch a pledge back in 2018 to become carbon neutral by 2050. At the beginning of this year, we have moved that target in a decade, and we have decided to become or to fully decarbonize all our operations, meaning shipping, air, land operations as well, by 2040. The reason we did so is because technology is already available right now. If we really want to make an impact in this decade, so before 2030, we know that we should bet on green methanol because it's the one technology that is safest to be used right now. The main challenge is to scale out the production of green methanol right now. We have ordered 18 vessels that they can both operate using the current bunker fuel that we have, but also green methanol. Those 18 ships, they will consume annually around 1.5 million tons of green methanol. The production right now is only 30,000 in the world, and we operate more than 750 vessels across the globe. And we are just one of the liners, right? We have seen now COSCO, one of our largest competitors from China, to start ordering vessels that they can move using green methanol. We see also some other players like CMA doing the same. So for us, the main challenge right now is to increase or scale up the production of green methanol in order to produce an impact in this decade. But sourcing the required investments for shipping and designing the instruments that are needed to make the green transition a social and also commercial viable reality is key right now. So it's very important that we get also the right global regulation in place. Because investment only come when regulation is in place. So we really need an end date to fossil fuels for shipping. This is the only way that we are going to lower in greenhouse emissions in this sector. And this is the way that we are going to see companies setting zero targets. We also need a global carbon tax. Our CEO, Francesco, has put a number to that, at least $150 per ton of CO2 emitted, right? We could use the money that we will get to put it in a fund that will be invested in developing countries, also to have the possibility to jump into the soon-to-be green energy market. And last but not least, we also need fuel standards, right? And other measures based on life cycle analysis.
Thank you, Concha. And of course, a great objective, carbon neutral by 2040. You highlighted some of the aspects that are needed, scalability of the fuels. We have heard how the countries are already working on that, developing countries. You highlighted the role that IMO is playing, which, with great efforts, all the countries are working really hard, in particularly to get the regulation in place and also the necessary support for member states, including potentially the economic measures as well, which are quite advanced in the discussions right now. In order to close the loop now, can we go to José Firmo? Of course, this is now, we're going to the port. And José Firmo is the CEO of the ports of Azul in Brazil since 2019. And in previous roles, he has been Senior Vice President of the Western Hemisphere for Seadrill and President of Seadrill Brazil. I put a slide, if you can please put a slide on the screen, because I think it's going to help you into what is the revolution that is happening in Brazil when it comes to the port, and that will complete the first part of this round of conversations.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to truly thank for the invitation to participate here. Real honor to be on my first COP as well as you, Lynn. So it's a very interesting opportunity to represent Port of Açu. And this port is in Brazil, for those that don't know. And it is important to mention all the challenges that were noted here, and they are really, really big, right? We heard the size from Mr. Lynn. We learned the difficulty of financing from Rebeca. And then finally, I thought it was really interesting from Mr. Francesco when he says, well, these ports will probably have a different role in the future of this decarbonization. And I think that is a little bit what I would like to talk about. For Brazil, this is a big challenge as well. However, it's a major opportunity. The country has more than 50%, around 51% of its energy matrix already renewable, which is pretty amazing. Out of the electricity production in Brazil, 85% of it is already from renewable sources, from hydro, from solar, and from wind. This, for a country with 220 million people, it's pretty remarkable, and it started way back then when we first invested in hydro, and later on when we worked a lot on biofuels. So ethanol became a solution for Brazil many decades ago. So we feel ready for the challenge. Not that it's easy, it's billions of tons, as we said, the solution for the global market. However, for us, what we are thinking there is for a country that today has more than 100 gigawatts of wind, offshore wind projects looking at the coast of Brazil, this is a great opportunity to export those electrons. And it could be in many different sources, but I think we all agree hydrogen will be right in the middle. So we truly think that hydrogen, it's going to work, but I would like to just question a little bit is, do you go for what kind of fuel? And I think we're discussing here the future over the next 20, 30 years, that we need to produce ships for the next 20, 30 years, but we don't know exactly where this fuel is going to go. So we truly believe in what we put together is this initiative of having the hydrogen there with multiple sources, and here you're seeing biomasses, biogas, solar, and wind, mainly from the grid or from offshore wind, which is right in front of the port. We were really lucky because there are 3 hotspots of offshore wind in Brazil, one in the northeast, one in the south of the country, and one is 20 kilometers away from the port today. So we have this natural capacity of producing. There's about 30 gigawatts of projects looking at in front of the port. However, what we truly want to do is to de-risk these projects in order to go for more than just producing fuel. Producing fuel is important because I think we heard you decarbonize the shipping, but you have to decarbonize the industries, and you're going to carry a lot of that fuel to decarbonize the industries. But what we have an opportunity with a brand new port, only 8 years old, is already the second largest port in Brazil moving cargo with almost 60 million tons of cargo. And 44 square kilometers of retro area ready. Comparing that with big energy ports globally, they are 95% occupied already. We are just starting. So we have a great opportunity, a little bit like you mentioned, to build this from scratch, to get the energy and get the hydrogen, but also get the industrialization in the same place. So you can export ammonia or methanol, but you can also export low carbon steel. You can also export nitrogen-based fertilizers. The country today imports 90% of its nitrogen-based fertilizer. It can be still produced in there with low carbon or at zero carbon with green hydrogen, and also doing that balancing with the fuels. What we truly believe is that you can hedge all these sources of energy together with hedge all the industrialization and use of those energies in order to attract the financing. Because you're not going to be building a case or building a project for one single solution. You build that project with the capacity of doing multiple sources of use of that hydrogen. That is the mindset there. That's what we believe. It's thinking big. Yes, it is thinking pretty big, but what we've seen here in COP, and I'm really excited with it, is the size of the challenge to resolve this globally requires some pretty big ambitions, and that's what we have in Port of Açu.
Thank you. And I think we're all about believing and being ambitious. We recognize the challenges, but everybody has outlined the opportunities. And of course, there's a lot of work that has to go with all those opportunities, and we can't forget the seafarers as well. We're running short on time. If anybody wants to ask a question, please just raise your hand, because otherwise, you will miss a great opportunity. Lynn, if I come back to you, because you painted a picture of, it wasn't a negative picture, it was of the challenges that we have there, the needs for large amounts of renewable fuels. But you see that there's a lot of opportunities already ongoing, projects, partnerships, etc. Plus, I think you're also working on the safety aspects that we need to look into or take into account, and the Just Transition Task Force has already been working really hard, and the IMO is doing it in the revision of the training convention. Anything that you would like to react to now?
Thanks for that. Yeah, and I will say, first of all, that I don't mean to paint a negative picture. I think it's very important for us to understand the numbers and what's on the ground and what the challenge is, because it's only by understanding the true challenge can we best position ourselves to address it. So I'll say that. And so it's not meant to be despondent. It's really to kind of see how big the challenge is and how we can best tackle things. Now, coming back to safety, I think the safety that you're referring to, Arsenio, is of course ammonia. So we all know ammonia at 3,500 ppms can be lethal, so it can be a toxic gas. So I think it's really the responsibility of this sector to address the safety of ammonia. I'm not fazed by that challenge because, I mean, you just have to look across the board. The chemical industry figured out how to handle chlorine, which is a very toxic gas. The microelectronics industry figured out how to handle silane, another very toxic gas. So ammonia is something that we need to get a handle on. 2 months into our founding, we decided this was very important, that we need to address this, because if we look up and down the supply chain, there are engine makers that are making ammonia engines, and then when the engine's available, the ship will be available shortly after that. If you look up the production supply chain, you guys are all working hard in producing enough green hydrogen as feedstock for green ammonia. Where we identified a gap is really in the safety, in bunkering ammonia, moving the molecules around. Now, granted, ammonia is moved around as a cargo, but using it as a bunker fuel is very different. The transfer frequency is different, the volumes are different, the way in which you transfer is different. So in addition to using the guidelines that are available for looking at ammonia as a cargo, we thought it was important for us to address how the safety is done. So the safety study that was commissioned addresses and basically articulates the safety envelopes, under what conditions, down to the flow rates, down to the piping, down to what kind of configuration makes sense. And so the idea is to generate these safety guidelines for 2 reasons. One is so that we can actually do a pilot to demonstrate that you can bunker ammonia. And so what that means is a regulatory sandbox needs to be set up. So with these guidelines, we can then begin to think about the regulatory sandbox. The other would be, with these guidelines, then they can eventually become technical references, just like for liquefied natural gas, and then you can push them through the Standards Development Organization and the ISOs so that there are standardized protocols for dealing with ammonia. So that's sort of the safety piece. And then there's the competency training piece, which is what you referred to, Arsenio. It's not enough for us to figure out how to handle ammonia. We need to train the seafarers and the operators so that they can handle it safely. So part of this study addresses a competency framework. This competency framework will be converted into curriculum. And so this is done by the Singapore Maritime Academy that trains seafarers worldwide. And then it's going to be to use this so that we can use this to then operationalize the training of seafarers and operators to handle ammonia.
Thank you, Lynn, and of course we look forward to the outcome of that study. In the meantime, I'm sure you want to say something. Yes.
So can I just say a very positive panel? So thank you and congratulations. This COP does feel different about how we're doing implementation. I think, speaking on behalf of the seafarers, but probably in respect of a lot of other workers in the conversation, it's critical that you take them on the journey, because our reality is a little bit, this subject is very intimidating for working people in, let's say, oil refineries. There's some fantastic proposals from Namibia and Brazil, which could be really good jobs, like really good, secure, safe jobs. So I think the big question and challenge is, and we launched yesterday our Just Transition for the seafarers on board the ships. But those numbers are quite small in respect of, they're big, so 800,000, it's big and it's a big challenge. But if you imagine we have to create the supply chain to build the bunkering, we also have to have the conversation about what does that mean for refineries, what does that mean for truck drivers, what does that mean for the next generation of people? So the invitation is ITF and through other global unions would love to partner with you on how we explore that, because many of the societies will also, we know it's not always that easy to put a wind terminals and hydrogen refineries in process. So there's a lot of work, but if you win over the workers and they understand what is the opportunity rather than they just fear the change, it gives us a very united front, and I reaffirm the invitation. But really positive panel, thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. As you said, this is a collaborative effort, and we're all in this together. Because we're short on time, can I give you a minute each to just give your takeaways, your feedback into the exchange that we just had? James, can I start with you, please?
Yeah, sure. I think my closing comments on this, and I really loved seeing the portfolio of opportunities in ASU, right? Is look, my background was financing, so I know that ambition and policy desire is one thing, but I think one of the biggest things we're really trying to do is to package projects in a way that is commercially viable and attracts an appropriate source of funding. So I think, again, on Tuesday we launched our blended financing infrastructure fund, which will essentially be looking to attract capital to build the infrastructure that is going to be required, whether that's renewable energy, the transmission lines, or the pipelines. And I'd love to sort of engage with other emerging markets to learn about how we can be more effective at COP. You know, like I see a lot of our brethren coming to COP and saying, give us the money, give us the money, give us the money. But you have to do the hard work to get past feasibilities and take these projects to financial close. Otherwise, we will run out of time. And we're doing some work on that. We're working with climate fund managers, FMO, AFDB, etc. But I'm sure you're doing something as well with some other players. I saw the World Bank there as well. And so I think dialoguing more about how we can learn from one another, because I think Lynn or somebody else said that the opportunity is tremendous. 5% of the total amount of fuels out there is huge. And so I don't actually see competition, but I do see a lot of opportunity to collaborate both between emerging and developed nations. So that's actually what I'd love to be my closing comments. Let's focus on building projects and getting them to financial close, and not to stop at policy ambitions.
Thank you. José, please.
Just reiterate the fact that we have a large enough challenge ahead of us, and therefore our ambitions have to be as big as the challenges. And I think the discussions that we're having here and the opportunity to bring together this level of cooperation between the different stakeholders of this business is the first step. We need to continue to do that, but we also need to find those companies out there that are willing to step change and do the leapfrog and think about this big ambition. I think taking this word out there and having this discussion in order to find those companies that are really willing to make the change and make the bets, and I think we've heard some of the bets here today, and very important. And then I invite everybody to look at what the role, and I think Francesco said it, what is the role changing for every one of us? Because it's not going to be the same. I don't think we can simply transition to a different solution and stay doing the same things the same way we used to do. There's lots of changes on the roles and the responsibility of each one of the stakeholders in here, and I think we still have to talk a lot about that. So thank you very much for the opportunity, and I look forward for the next discussions.
Thank you. Ms. Nawal, please.
Yes, thank you, everyone. So basically, from my side, I think we are all here in COP, which is the implementation. I would like to thank the Egyptian presidency for hosting such an event. However, I'm saying that UAE is welcoming all of you to partner with us, as we are hosting also the COP28, inshallah, next year. So definitely the international collaboration is the key enabler for just transition, and we should all work together. We are inviting you to come with us and collaborate, because it is not only one country job, it is all together to achieve our own targets. Each and every country have its specific and national circumstances. However, we can all achieve the targets with our resources and transferring knowledge, technologies, as well as the fund required for this just transition. So I said that we are keen to target 25% from the hydrogen key market by 2030. However, we are pursuing another opportunities with another markets as well. So we are currently under process of preparing our national strategy for hydrogen. which will be published by next week, by next month, by next year, sorry, which is eventually 1 month ago coming. So definitely welcome everyone for you to approach us, and we are welcoming to collaborate with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Concha?
Yeah, the task ahead of us is huge, and we know at Maersk how scary and complex this is. But if we look forward and if we look to the future, this is the only way to go. Collaboration is key. Private and public partnership is so important in this journey. We can testify that because just this year we have signed 7 strategic agreements with 7 companies from across the globe, from China to Europe and the US, of all type and size, from startups to really well-recognized energy producers. But we have also signed memorandums of understanding with the government of Egypt, also last week with the Spanish government. There is a lot to be done, but we really need to do it, and we really need to see progress already now, because otherwise we are not going to be able to reach our target. Nothing is perfect as of now, but we cannot wait for others to start executing. We all have a responsibility as businesses and as politicians, as regulators. So please make sure that we all go together in this and we start working out also, because we see, for instance, a lot of commitment from the liners, for example, but we need more investment in the infrastructure, as you have pointed at the beginning, right? On the bunkering, on upscaling skills, also on land. So there's a lot of things to be done, so let's please work together and make it happen.
Thank you. Rear Admiral, please.
Sorry. Thank you, sir. I will be in a short statement. Really, I want to emphasize that the working together is the key of success. We already start. We have to go forward and non-stop. There is a lot of projects we have now. In the same climate, we look for safety, for more jobs, a better life, with same future in the same planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, Lynn, please.
I promise, Arsenio, I'll be short. So just piggybacking on what everybody said, right? I mean, the energy transition, we're trying to do this in 3 decades when the energy infrastructure was built over more than a century. So collaboration is key, and collaboration across sector, not only within sector. Because as we know it, I mean, I think, what is it, $2 to $3 trillion needs to be spent in order to decarbonize shipping, but 80% of it is going to be spent on land infrastructure, which is outside what you would call, you know, traditional boundaries of sector. So collaboration is definitely key. And then it's going to be all about actions. So GCMD is positioned to pilot low carbon solutions end to end. So we welcome partners to think about pilots, and we're happy to come in and partner with you.
Thank you. You have been fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing all that information. I hope you can join me in the appreciating all the panel on this. Thank you very much. Do you have a question? I need to give you. We're improvising.
Sorry, my name is Young-Soo Kim. I'm the head of partnership from IMO. I would like to say everything you have said about partnership can be done with us. Our SG mentioned this our opening speech that, you know, we under the knowledge partnership mechanism we can partner with you, looking for your partners. And one thing I have realized throughout yesterday, today, meeting a lot of potential donors, they have a lot of money, but they are looking for the project or the partnership they want to spend their money on. While we have, the panelists said, the funding is one of the challenges. So linking this need of our member state and the need of the maritime with the funding opportunities of IFIs and potential donors is a job we can do on the knowledge partnership mechanism. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ashley.
Thank you, Yousif, for that. And of course, IMO, it's ready to partner with everybody and to support the member states in this transition. Now, to finalize and to close on a very high note, in a positive spirit that we all have kept this afternoon here, we'd like to invite Mr. Guy Platten, Secretary General of the International Chamber of Shipping. Guy?
Thank you very much, and I'm conscious time is short, so I will try and keep it brief. But Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for inviting me to speak, and thank you to IMO, IRENA, World Bank and UNCTAD for this opportunity. Also, thank you to the amazing speakers and panelists today. I think they've done an absolutely brilliant job and really have raised the decarbonisation debate. It does strike me, I started in my job 4 years ago in 2018. The climate change discussion was very different to the one we're having today. We, apart from acknowledging that it was a hard-to-abate sector, I think our focus was on things like IMO 2020 and low-sulphur fuels. But over the last 4 years, that has fundamentally changed. The fact that our industry is hard to abate has not changed, but the approach certainly has. We are a solutions-driven industry, and as we've heard today, we view the decarbonisation of our sector as an opportunity, acknowledging the challenges that that will bring. It's clear to me also that we must not work in silos anymore, and it's great hearing about all the partnerships under development. I think that's something very positive. We also heard that many countries, and we heard from Namibia, UAE, Egypt and Chile, about announcing plans to produce and export zero-emission hydrogen-based fuels around the world. And also many countries have announced plans to import these new fuels to power their economies, be that electrical generation, heat or steel production. Yet there's no real planning in place to link all the elements of the energy value chain so we can build the capacity to transport these new fuels from producers to consumers. And as the IRENA report recently published said, that 50% of all the trade of these new fuels will need to be transported by ship, which makes shipping an enabler of the wider energy transition. So to ensure that zero-emission fuels are available at scale, we really need to start planning and de-risking those investments for the transport now. Together with the International Association of Ports and Harbours, we launched what we're calling the Clean Energy Marine Hubs Initiative, which will be a public-private platform linking the energy sector and maritime for low-carbon fuels. The initiative brings CEO-led Clean Energy Maritime Task Force with members across the energy maritime value chain and finance providers as well, along with governments. And working with the Clean Energy Ministerial and their member governments, we aim to accelerate the deployment of infrastructure and to de-risk the investment needed so that we have the ships able to operate safely at the time and scale needed. On Monday, we were pleased to announce that 3 more countries have joined our initiative. That is Panama, Uruguay and Norway, and they will join with Canada and the UAE in working with our task force to start this work. The Clean Energy Marine Hubs will develop a tangible action plan for the approval of ministers at the next Clean Energy Ministerial meeting in India. A year on from COP26, a great deal is still being talked about the production of hydrogen and other low-carbon fuels, but very little on how this will actually be done or how these new fuels will be transported. That's why we believe this initiative is so crucial, bringing together the whole of the energy value chain and make sure that the using net zero emission fuels becomes a reality, considering the needs and times of productions of these vessels and carriers. Because we have limited capacity in our shipyards, and building the port and the people infrastructure needed is not a quick task. So both governments and companies need to start planning now so that the investment happens at scale in the timescales we need to decarbonise by 2050. On Wednesday, as we heard from Stephen Cotton, the General Secretary of the ITF, along with the UN Global Compact, the IMO and the ILO, we set out an action plan which is part of a position paper mapping a just transition for seafarers, which fundamentally sets out a pathway and recommendations to upskill seafarers to meet shipping's decarbonisation goals. The 10-point action plan was developed in response to research and modelling conducted by DNV, commissioned by the Maritime Just Transition Task Force, and that found that hundreds of thousands of seafarers, perhaps as many as 800,000, will require additional training by the mid-2030s. All these action points are interconnected and vital for developing and developed countries as we move forward on our energy transition. They're available on the ICS website, the ITF website, and the UN Global Compact website, and I would urge you to download them and study them very carefully. Because it's clear from the discussion today that there's tremendous opportunities, and the representative of the shipping industry, I know we're all looking forward to, as a member of the shipping community, I'm looking forward to delivering not only a decarbonised sector, but low carbon energy for the world. Because we have the opportunity to be a trailblazer in the development of a global measure that will catalyse the usage of zero emission fuels by ships, regulation that favours the transformative change that is needed at a global scale. And I think, Maersk, you talked about $150 a tonne, but there's a recognition we have to start paying an economic measure in order to decarbonise. ICS submitted a proposal to the IMO for a first of its kind fund and reward system to catalyse the adoption of alternative fuels, which currently costs at least 2 or 3 times more than the conventional marine fuel. And we hope that we can discuss this with member governments at the forthcoming MEPC. Ladies and gentlemen, we are living in exciting times. The opportunities are endless and the stakes could not be higher. The challenge now is to turn these discussions into reality and to take the decisions that will deliver the change we all want. Shipping has the opportunity to be a trailblazer for the world, and I encourage you to support all the initiatives and all the ideas that have been discussed today. As the UN Secretary General said in his opening remarks here at COP27 in Egypt, let's fight together and let's win. Thank you all very much indeed, and thank you for the discussion today.
Thank you, Guy, for those closing remarks. And for me, it's just to thank you all for joining us and staying with us this afternoon. For those following us online, thank you very much for keeping with us. And